Good afternoon again from London, and hello to all dear comrades, friends, and supporters from me, Dr. Dermot Hudson, Chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea, Chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK, and the official delegate of KFA for the UK, and of course the owner of this very self-same channel, Songam 007, of the militant voice of Songam and Juche in the UK, defending people's career with no ifs or buts, and dare I say, probably the only pro-DPRK, pro-Juche YouTube channel in the UK. And because we defend people's career with no ifs or buts, I'm doing this video refuting lies about the DPRK, a big slander against the DPRK by ultra-leftists. Now, usually we have to defend people's career against lies and slanders by imperialist reactionaries, by rightists, by liberals, by revisionists. But over the last maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, there's been a new trend in anti-DPRK propaganda, the hostile propaganda against people's career, the use of ultra-left outlets, some proclaiming themselves anti-revisionist, and, hardline ML, who actually attack the DPRK from ultra-leftists, from purist positions. And I got alerted to an attack by the US-based ultra-leftist website Politsturm. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, who had posted an article on its YouTube titled, and I quote, "The DPRK leadership gained access to new technologies in Russian markets in exchange for the participation of North Korean troops on Russia's side." Now, I've already put up a posting on YouTube, on the blog, and so on. But I mean, I think the first thing to say, this is whole approach is very dismissive of the DPRK. Seeing, trying to paint the DPRK as very dependent and so on, as if it can't produce its own technology. And the whole thrust, and I'll come on to this a bit later, of Politsturm's line of argument against the DPRK is not simply ultra-leftist, but it's actually very anti-small countries. It's big power chauvinism, and I've been told, I don't know whether it's true, that Politsturm is actually Russian ultra-leftists living in the USA, maybe in exile in the USA. Maybe the US imperialists grants political asylum to some Russian ultra-leftists. So, let's look in depth at the article. It is basically repeating imperialist talking points, Western media talking points about the DPRK's relationship with the Russian Federation. Now, I think it's a fact that cannot be denied that the DPRK's international prestige has risen greatly in the past 3 or 4 years. The DPRK recently successfully celebrated the 80th anniversary of the foundation of the Great Workers' Party of Korea, the longest socialist, the party with the longest history of a ruling party in the socialist camp. Now, the imperialists are desperately trying to pour cold water on this, and the ultra-leftists of Politsturm are giving them a helping hand. The article is literally peppered with references to imperialist and South Korean puppet sources. It seems to me that the true believers of Politsturm, for whom the DPRK is not pure enough, are more than happy to resort to using imperialist and bourgeois sources. The DPRK did not gain access, quote unquote, to new technologies in exchange for participation of troops of the Korean People's Army on the side of Russia. Firstly, the DPRK's intercontinental ballistic missile program, its nuclear program, and other weaponry are products of self-reliance and the DPRK's Juche-based technology. Politsturm is just repeating the false narrative of the imperialists that the DPRK cannot make anything itself, that it is dependent on other countries. In fact, the DPRK has an independent national economy capable of making anything from a wristwatch to a nuclear weapon or an intercontinental ballistic missile. Secondly, the participation of troops in the Korean People's Army in the operation to liberate Kursk was according to the DPRK Russian Treaty of June 2024, which contained a clause that each side can ask the other for military assistance if the other is attacked. It is about mutual assistance, not the transfer of technology. Thirdly, the participation of KPA troops in the Kursk operation gave the KPA valuable combat experience in fighting imperialist-backed troops in a situation of real war. Politsturm betray themselves as being very clearly influenced by imperialist and NATO propaganda when they referred to, and I found this laughable, quote unquote, a Ukrainian counter-offensive. What? What are these people on? Ukraine is a neo-Nazi state which tried to invade the Kursk region of the Russian Federation. Basically, the DPRK sending troops was the DPRK doing its bit in the struggle against international fascism. Previously, the KPA had participated in operations in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, in Egypt and Syria in 1973, and had given assistance to Angola and Zimbabwe, just to name a few countries. And, maybe it's also interesting to mention how DPRK troops actually helped foil a coup by French mercenaries in the People's Republic of Benin in the 1970s. Will Pritchardson also criticised the DPRK for assisting the United Arab Republic and Syria on the grounds that they were non-socialist states, or arguably less socialist states, or capitalist states that were really aspiring towards socialism and weren't actually socialist. Now, if you take the line of Politsturm, it would have been wrong for Stalin to have allied the USSR with imperialist Britain and imperialist USA, which at the time, Britain was probably the biggest imperialist power with the British Empire, which had been built up on the blood of the colonial peoples of different countries, from Ireland to India. And indeed, Churchill, when he was in power in the 40s, presided over a terrible famine in India. The US at the time was the emerging big imperialist power. It was rising to the top of the imperialist ranks and would soon take over from Britain as the biggest imperialist power. But the USSR was allied to them in the war against Nazi Germany. But as I say, if you take the purist logic of Politsturm, that would have been quite wrong, because you cannot, according to them, ally with a capitalist state or an imperialist state. Similarly, according to their logic, it would have been wrong for the USSR to have concluded the non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany in 1949, which was a measure taken to buy time and to secure the western borders of the USSR against Nazi aggression. And you wonder about some of these ultra-leftists. Would they have come out with slogans during the Second World War? Critical support for the German working class against the Anglo-imperialist invasion of Germany. That's the silliness of uh, the ultra-leftists. Politsturm also made a lot out of the presence of a delegation of the United Russia Party, but in fact there was also a very big delegation of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Some Russian communists, were also present as members of DPRK study delegations and friendship delegations. For an example, an official of the All-Union Communist Party of Bolsheviks, Nina Andreeva of Belarus, participated in the celebrations as delegate of a DPRK study group. The Politsturm article ignores the complexities of the DPRK's international relations. It is true that relations between the DPRK and Russia are flourishing. They are neighbouring countries. So it's not abnormal, because they are becoming closer. But only 8 years ago, the Russian Federation voted for sanctions on the against the DPRK in the UN Security Council. However, in recent years, Russia itself has become a target of imperialism. It has had sanctions imposed on it. It has also been subjected to demonisation by the imperialist media, like the DPRK. So it's natural for anti-imperialist states to come together to cooperate and make common cause. Surely it is a victory for the DPRK that has broken through the diplomatic blockade and established good relations with its neighbouring countries. The DPRK is not dependent on China, as Politsturm asserts. I mean, this is an old horse chestnut that is dredged up every so often, and again, it is a myth. And in fact, the relationship with China was always complicated. Do not forget that in 1956 it was not just a pro-Soviet faction trying to overthrow the leadership of the DPRK, but a pro-Chinese faction as well. The DPRK economy has become more self-reliant since the 1990s. I can remember visiting the DPRK in the 1990s and going around the shops. And in those days, many of the goods on the shelves were produced in China. But nowadays, the shops in the DPRK are stocked with domestically sourced projects. A member of the Korean Friendship Association from another country who studied on a course in Kim Il-sung University and actually lived in the DPRK for 3 months, said it was actually possible to live exclusively on DPRK products for 3 months. Moreover, the DPRK in 2020 shut its border in January and survived without a problem for more than 4 years. This fact alone dashes the argument that the DPRK couldn't survive without China. This fact alone dashes the argument that the DPRK couldn't survive without China to shreds. Politsturm, I say, are very ignorant of the relationship of the DPRK both to China and to Russia and to the old Soviet Union. Now, I mean, one to last points. What I noticed was that the ultra-leftists of Politsturm managed to simultaneously attack the DPRK for being dependent on Russia and China, but isolationist at the same time. You know, it can't be both. It's impossible for it to be both. And I think it's also very telling about Politsturm is that they actually criticised the DPRK, for warming up relations with China and Russia and for being too close to Russia and China. But it seems to upset them that they've closed the door very hard on South Korea. Now, what can we say about people who would like the DPRK to open up to South Korea, a fascist colony, a fascist puppet regime? Why would they want the DPRK to open up to South Korea? Answers on a postcard, please, as we say. Politsturm actually strongly attacked the new line of the DPRK on reunification, moaning about cutting roads to South Korea and the demolition of the reunification monument. In my view, these are just and revolutionary measures to protect Juche-based socialism and prevent the puppet fascist regime in South Korea from annexing the DPRK. I would sort of pose the question, does Politsturm want the end of Juche socialism in the DPRK to be absorbed into South Korea? I think they need to answer that. Whose side are they on? And one very, very last thing, in some of the exchanges that occurred after they published this article, they actually claimed it was okay for the USSR to ally itself to US and British imperialism in the Second World War because it was a big country And because it's a big country, it can do this, but it's actually wrong for the DPRK, a small country, to do this. This, in my opinion, betrays the fact that Politsturm are big power chauvinists. To conclude, to conclude, to conclude here, defend people's career with no ifs or buts. Uh, Down with the ultra-leftist slanderers of people's career. Long live Duce, long live self-reliance, long live people's career. Thank you for listening. It's getting so dark around here, can't believe it. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button and try and get a few more subscribers to the channel. Also, please check out our publications. There'd be a link. These books written by myself, but also other people in KFA UK. Our organisation secretary is writing a new book. I'd say I'm writing a big blockbuster about the dirty tricks against KFA, and I can recently report that recently my book Anti-Revisionist Fortress of Duce was translated into German, and 20 copies were sold at the Nuremberg Leftist book fair. You can also support us by coming to our events. Please check our social media for details. And lastly, you can support our work by donating to KFA UK or myself. I wish everybody a very good day. It is indeed a very bleak November day, but try to have a great day. And I'll see all of you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.